Cave with Mike and Max.
Welcome back to the Chat Cave here on McGTV, youtube.com/MikeMcGTV. Follow me on Twitter at MikeMcGTV. And as always, it's your Chat Cave hosts, Mike McG and
Max Andrews. How's it going?
Going great. It's been a while since we done an episode.
I mean, no, we tried last week, and there were some technical difficulties that prevented the Chat Cave duo from getting together. But we're back again. We finally got together. We're ready to do this one. This is an important episode.
Yes, landmark episode. I don't know if it's landmark, but it's definitely the first episode of 2018, so that's something. So, this is a Chat Cave, actually, when we first started doing To the Chat Cave, that Max and I had wanted to discuss for a while. It was actually one of the first topics that we kind of came up with when we were coming up with this idea for a Batman podcast. We just never got around to it because, and I don't know if you've heard, but in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of Bat news in other forms other than the comics, like movies. And we were going to discuss I would say it's a pretty significant comic book arc at this point. And I think this is one of your personal favorites, Max.
Oh, yeah. And it's weird because I came at this one backwards. I saw the movie before I read the comic book.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, like I really dig it just because of everything the story brings, all the history it brings back, and I just think it's a solid story, and it's the philosophical question about Batman. It's a really solid book. It's definitely one of my favorites.
And that story is Batman Under the Hood. Well, the movie's called Under the Red Hood, but the actual story arc is just known as Under the Hood.
Oh, okay. Well, this must be a newer one that I bought.
Yeah, I think they've done a couple of re-releases that add in the red because, you can't just gather from that title that it's Red Hood they're talking about, of course.
That's better. I like that better. I wish they wouldn't have changed it.
Yeah. It's a little vague, and you're kind of wondering, it's got a little bit of mystery and intrigue involved in the title, and then you're like, oh, it's a Red Hood story. Cool. And then, oh, it's actually this type of story. Cool.
Yeah, I dig that. I wish they wouldn't have put Red Hood on there. I mean, that's a lot more nuanced. That's a lot cooler. Yeah, I wish they would have left that alone. That's a shame.
So, needless to say, we're going to be diving into the plot of this particular story arc. There are some spoiler warnings here at the top, in case you aren't familiar with current Batman mythology and what's entailed in Under the Hood or Under the Red Hood. Spoilers abound here from here on out.
We did good there.
Yeah, that's true. Do you want to maybe take the summary here, or give us an idea of what to expect in Under the Hood or Under the Red Hood?
In Under the Hood, which is better, there's some new muscle in town. Someone shows up and starts taking out bad guys and doing it with the good display of force, and the guy's Red Hood. No one can figure out who it is, where they came from, and he's got mad skills. Comes up against Batman a couple times and just barely makes it out, but that's saying something because he went up against Batman. But he always had a plan. It's very, you don't know who this guy is, but it turns out to be Jason Todd, and Batman thought he was dead, and he was not dead, and that was a big reveal and a big drop because Jason Todd was the Robin after Dick Grayson, who everyone hated so much that they voted to have him killed. He could have. They're like, we could either send him off riding in the sunset or kill him. They voted to kill him. All the fans hated Jason Todd so much that they voted that. And the way they killed him was so brutal because the Joker gets a hold of him, beats him half to death with a wrench, and then blows him up.
Oh, that Joker!
So silly, but yeah. So it's just so brutal, and Jason Todd died so horribly. And I love it. It's wow, killed the shit out of this dude. But yeah, so that happened, and yeah, so they're bringing Jason Todd back, and they do it in spectacular fashion. The book is really really good. They bring back because they're trying to figure out who the Red Hood is. You know, they bring back everybody in this book. Like, I mean, Deathstroke, the Terminator, Captain Nazi,
who gets it. He gets like tased in the face or something, right?
Black Mask, Joker, Nightwing, yeah, a whole bunch of other characters in this one, and I dig it. The story is really cool. The art in the book is just superb.
It's a very, I want to say, compelling bit of like character study. You mentioned this earlier, talking about the philosophy of Batman and how he has a moral code that he's not going to cross, as much as he has a desire to maybe permanently do away with villains like Joker. He won't do that because he knows that it'd be too simple, it'd be too easy to give into that. And Batman's all about discipline. And so when ultimately a ghost from the past comes back and is kind of trying to push him to that limit of where he would take a life, what does Batman do in the face of that?
But also, it talks on I mean, obviously Batman won't kill, but it's like Batman tries to stop all crime. And he's like, you're never going to do that. And it's like, if you control the crime, then at least the people who don't want to be involved don't get involved.
Yeah, because ultimately that's Red Hood's goal, is that he's not necessarily, I mean, he wipes out people that he feels he needs to wipe out, but that it's more about, okay, I understand crime is always going to be a fact of life, robberies and drug trafficking and things like that. And so he tries to regulate it as a crime boss, try to hustle the other crime bosses out of their cuts, in which they, like you said, involve more innocent bystanders. And he's trying to, mitigate that.
So that's the other thing too. That's what I really liked about the book. I mean, and they just do a good little bit of storytelling. Like I really dig it. I'm just paging through right now. If you catch me at a pause, like I'm paging through the book, like looking at all this, like Count Vertigo shows up.
Mm-hmm.
This is a real fun Batman story. I'm really glad I came at it backwards, because the book has just got so much more. There's so many more villains in there. There's so much more that Batman has to kind of go through to get to Jason Todd, and then when he tries to fix all the stuff that Jason has set into motion now, taking on all these crime families. I don't know. It's just a better, more in-depth piece than the movie. But the movie's really good too. But I'd recommend, if you haven't seen either, go at it backwards. Watch the movie first, then read the book, because I think you'll get a lot more from it that way. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just so solid. I just dig it, because, like, at the end of the day, how does Batman is about justice. It's like, people should be doing the right thing all the time. There's nothing wrong with that,
Mm-hmm.
But Jason Todd's just like, well, there's a dark side to humanity, and it's always going to be there. So, like, what do we do about that? So, yada yada. And I really,
I agree very much with a lot of your sentiment. Is that we'll probably get a little bit into the movie later, but I definitely understand why they did what they did with that adaptation to kind of streamline it a little bit more. But when you go into a story arc that spans several issues, and not necessarily issues, in quick succession, like a 4 or 5 issue block, like the Red Hood stuff actually paced out off and on throughout the years every once in a while. Like they did the Lost Years, kind of going a little bit more into detail about what Jason was up to before he returned to Gotham. And it actually plays a little bit into another Batman story arc that we discussed a couple of episodes earlier, Hush.
which is another one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. It does kind of retcon a certain moment in Hush, but I'm honestly okay with the retcon. It is a little hokey what they end up doing, but I'm like, you know what? In service of a bigger vision or bigger story, yeah, sure, I get it.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to make some concessions for comic books, like let's play,
Yeah, in an industry where stories and origins are constantly being retconned, that's the least offensive one that I've seen. I also liked how they really played up a lot of the smaller, not just Batman rogues gallery, but also DC villains gallery as a whole. Like Black Mask, I never really cared much for Black Mask until I read Under the Hood.
Yeah, this one fleshed him out, and you're just like, all right, I can dig it. It gave him his due. For sure, I agree, because he was just kind of a throwaway gangster with a gimmick,
Mhm.
and this kind of gave him some heart.
But yeah, we also talk about how the lesser known villains, like you said, Count Vertigo and Deathstroke isn't a lesser known. I love how he's incorporated later on into the story, but let's say like Captain Nazi, how they're kind of put to use in the story as sort of, well, not Vertigo, but Nazi definitely is a red shirt.
Yeah, no, Captain Nazi is the easiest. That's like a wrestling. That's like a 1980s wrestling obvious bad guy. Like okay, ridiculous. When did they create that character? 1947.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do just like, but even the comic is kind of very aware of that because, again, spoilers, Red Hood during a street brawl ends up killing Captain Nazi, and Batman's really taken aback that Red Hood would do that, and Red Hood's like, oh, sorry, be thankful I just killed the Nazi.
Yeah.
Like, I do kind of like that take on not just Red Hood, but Jason Todd now, is that, yeah, back in when he was Robin, he was kind of insufferable and whiny and petulant. But now that he's got, his death under his belt, he's become kind of a cynical smartass that I actually kind of enjoy.
Yeah. And like I don't know, I don't disagree with him. That's the problem is I really don't disagree with Jason Todd's methods.
Yeah, I was about to actually ask you that question. It's like, whose side are you on in this whole morality debate?
I know Batman's got to win. Batman is right in an ideal world, but the real world, he's not wrong. Like people are gonna do, like people want to get high, people want to do bad things. You just got to try to keep innocent people away, like keep all the bad people playing with themselves, and keep all the people who don't want to play out of it. Like that's how Jason Todd sees it. But I understand Batman's got to win. Like that's just how things got to be.
Yeah, because it's an allegory essentially, and you want the ideal hero to prevail, even if he's not necessarily the most ideal.
It's weird, it's because like Batman is the hero that we want, but Jason Todd is the hero that we deserve.
Lifting those Michael Caine lines again, or no, that wasn't Michael Caine. That was what's his name, Gary Oldman. Do you have a favorite part of the story arc overall? Is there one specific moment that really leaps out at you as being like, oh yeah, that's some good under the hood stuff?
It's when Batman and the Red Hood end up fighting together. And then in that moment where he kills him too. Like that whole thing is my favorite, like part of it. Like where it's just absolutely certain, like, everyone knows who everyone is, but here they go. And like, it's like the old crew back together again, but like, what new tricks did they learn? It's like a really moment. And I really like that, when Batman and the Red Hood end up having to fight together.
And it's kind of cool too, because during that fight, like, Batman just falls back into routine with him. Like, he hasn't missed a beat. It's him and Robin fighting again, except this time Batman's like, I gotta be careful with this Robin, because he'll probably cut someone's head off if I'm not watching.
And he does.
Yeah, and that happens. But it's just a Nazi, so.
Yeah, like, you're gonna feel bad about the Nazi, like, for real. The dude is walking around with a giant swastika on his chest, Are we really missing that guy?
I'd say a favorite part for me is one of the interactions Jason ends up having with the Joker. At one point in the story, he's kidnapped Joker and is holding him tied to a chair and hostage, waiting for Batman to show up for his endgame. Joker does his typical, he acts like he's so not phased that Robin is back from the dead and is just doing his full-on crazy act, and Jason actually calls him out on it. He actually says something to the effect of, I've gained some clarity since we last met, and I see right through your act. You can fool Batman all you want, but I know deep down you're not as crazy as you want everyone to think you are. And it's the first time throughout the story that the Joker puts on a frown, and Jason walks away laughing. Like, to borrow from your talk about Assault on Arkham, like, he out crazied the Joker. Like, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and like that's the thing, and that's just making me realize, like, that might be, if someone pulls that one more time, it'll be overdone. Yeah, because Joker sets the bar on crazy. And if you can look him down and just be that much crazier than he is just once, you might live. Of
Yeah.
course, then he might just kill you.
Yeah. He's just that quote unquote crazy or unpredictable, at least, that it might just be over for you then and there because he's jealous that you stole his thunder momentarily.
You look the devil in the eye and see who blinks, and that's.
Is there anything in the story arc that you didn't really think was needed, or anything that you found kind of like, that's a weird choice?
Captain Nazi.
Well, we know why he's there, because you gotta kill off somebody at one point, and it might as well be this very disposable character from the 40s, who, let's face it, if you're a hardcore Captain Nazi fan, I'm a little concerned.
No, I feel like it was all solid. Like I'm not seeing too much of the fat. It might have been a little preachy, but no, I dug it. I'm gonna say I dug it.
What did you think of the Infinite Crisis incorporation? Because there's a point where the story comes to a bit of a pause when Bloodhaven, home of Nightwing, gets nuked, and Batman and Red Hood see it happen.
I don't know. With comic books, I give a lot of pass because that's a good moment too, where it's just like, holy crap, like what happened. But also, if they're that close to see it, like, aren't they just totally effed in the A?
I get, maybe. Well, Bloodhaven's been established as being right down the river from Gotham, I thought. So you could probably see it in the distance.
Yeah, they would just be. They'd have to. It should have ended up more like the Dark Knight Returns. Then
Oh yeah,
with nuclear fallout.
And he only had 12 seconds to fly that bomb out. I believe that. That's a different conversation that we've already had.
Yeah, no, it's they definitely got some comic book things there.
Yeah. You're going to have the crossovers, and when you have a big event series taking place at almost the exact same time as your little mini arc, it's bound to touch upon it.
It had taken as long, to get the whole thing out, because I wasn't even aware of it until the movie came out. So, that's bound to be affected by what you got going on.
You know what? It did play into it pretty well, because in that moment, Batman is thinking, oh no, my first Robin is possibly dead. The kid who's been a son to me since the early days is possibly dead. And here's your second son rubbing salt in the wound.
Trying to kill you just a little bit.
Like, I felt it gave proper build up into the potential end game of him forcing Batman to kill somebody. So I thought it worked.
It's not too ridiculous.
The one thing that I always kind of raised my eyebrow at, and it wasn't touched upon so much in the main story arc, but later on in the Lost Years stuff that followed up, how Jason comes back to life.
Yeah, I'm reading at the end of this one where it's like he's just half brain dead, walking around in the streets.
Yeah, but he was legit dead before that.
Oh, did they already bring him back?
No, here's what happened, because it has to do with Infinite Crisis as well. In Infinite Crisis, one of the main villains was leftover Superboy from the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, because he'd been trapped in a pocket dimension for that whole time, and he was trying to break out. And the way he was trying to break out was by punching the time barrier as hard as he could. Him punching the time barrier resulted in a bunch of weird anomalies in the time stream, and Jason not being reset as being alive, but being brought back to life in a timeline where he was supposed to stay dead was one of those. So it's a weird thing where magical time barrier stuff happens, and you have a half-dead Jason waking up in a coffin. It's messed up.
Yeah. Yeah, I just caught that. I like the Ra's al Ghul angle better.
Yeah, and they do that. He's not 100%. Like you said, he's wandering around brain dead until he's found by Ra's.
Was that the Crisis on Infinite Earths?
There was Crisis on Infinite Earths back in the 80s, and then Infinite Crisis was a mid-2000s sequel.
Yeah, and that was the one that got in the middle of this one?
Yeah, because the nuking of Bloodhaven tied into Infinite Crisis, because all the supervillains got together and were like, let's royally mess up the superheroes' stuff. And so they were like, let's nuke Bloodhaven because Nightwing's there. Why not?
It was what it was.
Yeah, let's get into discussing a little bit of the comparisons between the book and the film itself. I'm trying to really think what are some of the really big ones. They didn't have Captain Nazi. We're always coming back to Captain Nazi, but somehow I feel like a PG-13 animated superhero movie, probably don't put the Nazi in there.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to touch Captain Nazi at that point, which is fair because he's just a throwaway villain anyway. So
What they get in place of, they got like techno ninjas in place of that whole supervillain gang.
The Warriors 4 or some shit. Yeah, there's some cool generic people. They got like laser swords and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the moment there. That's the first Batman and Red Hood fighting together moment in the movie, and it was good enough. I dug I like the animation. I dug the action.
I like Joe DiMaggio as the Joker.
Yes, I thought that was the best Joker. That's not Mark Hamill. If I can't get Mark Hamill, I want that dude pulling that Joker. It's like a real gritty, dirty thing. It's like making a point to go exactly opposite of everything Mark Hamill ever did.
Yeah, he's a more, I don't know, even though he's still crazy, he doesn't feel crazy like Mark Hamill's Joker was. He's a little bit more subdued, which is hard to do, I think.
But it's also, I don't know, it's like, this is more of a gangster Joker, I want to say. There's more menace in his voice, and it's more of like an intimidation sort of thing, like just to get a little bit of fear, just like kind of put you on edge. It is how his voice does, and I dig it. It's definitely different, and it was not bad, and obviously John DiMaggio is everything, so it's like he's a professional.
What'd you think of Jensen Ackles as our first, I guess, movie version or animated version of Jason?
It was solid. It wasn't bad. Yeah, he just did an okay, solid job. I wasn't mad at it. I don't know. Maybe Jason Todd isn't a character that I care about so much to where like oh man, this guy did a great Jason Todd. But yeah, he did a good job. I don't want to take away from him and his performance at all. This was NPH's Nightwing, right?
Yeah, Neil Patrick Harris. I've always liked Neil Patrick Harris's voice work stuff. I've always thought the guy's talented, and I liked him in the role. Sounded very Dick Grayson-y. It was kind of weird though because I'd known him previously as being the voice for the MTV Spider-Man. So to at first hear MTV Spider-Man coming out of Nightwing's mouth was a little weird at first, but I was like, okay, it's just NPH. Good on him.
Yeah, I dug it too. I thought it was a great pick for Nightwing. Yeah, because he's just more lighthearted and joking and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good. I definitely dug it. Batman.
Bruce Greenwood, Kirk's not dad from Star Trek.
Okay, yeah. I don't think I liked him. Yeah, I thought it was meh.
Yeah, after being wined and dined by Conroy for several years, it's kind of hard to hear someone else take up the voice. I thought it was fine, if not a little too Bailey at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying way too hard to sound intimidating when you just should naturally sound intimidating.
Especially when you got John DiMaggio just oozing Joker all over the place. It's just so good.
Yeah.
Feel like they backed him up with the right Batman voice.
I will say though, they must have liked him enough because Bruce Greenwood went on to voice Batman in one of our favorite shows, Young Justice.
Yeah, but but Batman really isn't in that one to me. He gets like 4 lines in Young Justice because he's just like not in it. I'll argue the same thing. I don't really like his voice in that, but in Young Justice is much more acceptable because it's not a Batman cartoon.
He's 30 seconds of the show. He's like, team, go here, do this. Team, good job or not good job, depending on the episode.
Yeah, I thought it was a robot they had doing that. I was like, okay, cool. Like you get Batmobot 3000 to voice Batman, and we'll just call it a day.
Getting to the comparisons between the original story and the movie, I feel this works really well as an adaptation. Even though it has to excise a lot of the extra stuff, it does away completely with the Superboy punching time thing. And just goes straight for, Ra's al Ghul has Lazarus pits that resurrect the dead or heal people. Put Robin in one of those.
It hit that one hard with Occam's razor,
Mm-hmm.
It's why do we need all of this when this just makes sense? Yeah, that's one thing I appreciate. to be honest.
Yeah. For the adaptation, that they didn't go with the original death in the family reason for Robin. I mean, it ends up the same way. He gets beaten and blown up by the Joker. But that they don't get into the whole why that was happening in the comics, because that was a very convoluted and very 80s storyline about Joker getting chemical weapons for Iran or something, I think. He becomes the UN ambassador for Iran at one point and tries to kill off the United Nations, and he can't get caught on Jason's murder because, as was pointed out in Lethal Weapon 2, he has
diplomatic immunity.
There we go. I was like, he'll pick it up. I know he will. And I'm sure he said it just like that. I'm glad they kind of did away with that for the sake of the movie, and they tied it more into Ra's al Ghul, because it makes everything kind of work better in tandem, like work together. And it was written by the same dude who wrote the original Under the Hood story arc, Judd Winnick, who you might know as being a contestant on The Real World San Francisco back in the mid-90s before he started writing comics.
It's all coming together. That's that's funny. And then so that dude is on The Real World, and then the dude who voiced NPH voiced Spider-Man on MTV.
Yep.
Made it all happen, man. They're behind the scenes moving, turning these cogs and moving these things around.
So ever since this story, Red Hood's had kind of a big turnaround as a character in the past couple of years, wouldn't you say? Even though he might not be necessarily our favorite character in Batman mythology, there's a lot of Red Hood fans I notice these days.
Yeah, and I don't know. I dig him in this story, but I don't dig carrying on. I just they've tried to find a spot for him, and Red Hood knows the Outsiders is what they did for a little while there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess he's got a fan base, and he's deserving of that. I mean, obviously he's like the villain in Arkham Knight. He's got a lot more play right now, and because of this, and they've done this is of all the of course no one really dies comic book comebacks. I think this one it's been after all the ridiculousness of all the crises.
The multiple timelines. Yeah.
Since they've calmed down and tried to okay, well, how do we tell this story better? Because I like the idea of him coming back and Batman, the whole shtick being put into question.
Well, he even says it in the story, one of my biggest failures. His life was not just his death, but his life was my biggest failure. Because he couldn't see how violent and how unstable the kid was before he put him into crime fighting. And so he's kind of, all that's coming back in his face now.
Yeah, Batman made some bad decisions, and then people got brutally murdered.
So it's weird, man. Because did you ever read Wizard magazine?
I might have paged through a few, but I never had a subscription or nothing like that.
Right. I'd always pick up a copy here or there if I was in a Barnes and Noble, or if it was on the newsstand and something about it caught my eye, I'd pick it up and buy it. But they used to have a feature in Wizard, which would be this character versus this character. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically like Death Battle, and they would pit, Batman against Daredevil, or the Punisher against Lobo, or something like, just weird matchups, or matchups that make sense, whatever angle you look at it. And one they had in the April Fools, or the April issue, I think, was Jason Todd versus Bucky Barnes, the way they are now, which back in the late 90s, both of them were still dead. So it had this spread of these two skeletons, one in a Robin suit, one in a Bucky suit, lying in a grassy knoll. And the whole description was, the two corpses sit silently as the wind brushes past them. All of a sudden, a rabbit comes by and steals Bucky's glove. Jason Todd is the winner. And it's so weird because now, like you mentioned, we see Red Hood in movies and video games, potentially feature-length movies. There's a lot of hints in Dawn of Justice of a Robin dying, and it most likely was Jason Todd. So that might come into play down the line in this crappy universe we got on screen. And then you got Bucky, who is one of Marvel's favorite boy toys right now. Winter Soldier.
And and some of the best Captain America comic books are the Brubaker books, where Bucky is a huge part of that, and then Bucky ends up becoming Captain America. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Jason Todd became Batman for a blink for 5 minutes, and then Dick Grayson's like, no.
Nah, I got this. Don't worry about it, Brett.
It's just weird because I was like, yeah, they'll never bring back Jason. How naive. I'm like, they'll never bring back Jason Todd. They'll never bring back Robin. They'll never bring back Gwen Stacy. All these characters that are like back. Oh, dude, hardcore, and it's the Grant Morrison style of comic book that it allows for good storytelling, but it's always like, okay, well, somebody made up this throwaway character and nobody liked it, but how can I reincorporate that and make it and tell a good story? Mm-hmm.
And when they did right, and with Bucky, they're doing the right thing too. So I don't know, it's just like, how can we play in this sandbox, because it's always people creating more and more characters that just get thrown away because you need someone for the main people to go against, or the main people to get messed up over. I.e., who is that dude in the X-Men?
Thunderbird, the Native American dude who was in like 2 issues and then got blown up.
Yeah, that guy. So I'm sure he came back at some point in time. But
he's a character on The Gifted.
There you go.
They found a way.
So that's my point. Yeah, everyone's going to come back, so it's good as long as they're telling a good story, and I'm down. I think they, Under the Red Hood, pulls it off. Again, I like the newer adaptation than the older one, but other than like how he got there, I was happy to have Jason Todd back.
And that's something we thought we'd never say, because I do remember I have Death in the Family in paperback, and I have a couple of old 80s issues of Batman. And reading those issues now, yeah, Jason Todd as Robin is a hard sell. It really is. It's hard to read that character the way he was. But now at least they've done something to make him more interesting or more compelling, other than just being a whiner.
It's also he's like a whiner, but he's brutal, and it's like, if they would have just played up the brutality and dialed back the like, oh, I'm a whiny little kid, my life's so hard, or whatever. It's like just because, like, yeah, that's the other thing I like about the movies. Like, they show you flashbacks of Batman and Jason Todd Robin, and you see like he's reckless and he's and he's hardcore, and Batman's like, whoa, like, but he doesn't realize the scope of the problem yet. And yeah, that's a much better story.
Mm-hmm. It makes Batman more interesting, definitely. And it shows that he's not just a cold, dispassionate tutor to these kids that he brings in as sidekicks. Like, he actually cares about them.
It's a good story. I definitely, there's some trimming of the fat that benefited the story.
Definitely. I can't remember if we did like a rating system for Hush or anything like that, but using your own Bat scale, what would you give Under the Hood?
It's 7 Chatterangs.
Oh, 7 Chatterangs. There we go. I'm going to go by that scale now that you modified it for our own podcast here, To the Chat Cave. So 7 Chatterangs. Cool. Out of 10. I'd give it about 7 as well. 7 Chatterangs out of 10. It's some solid writing, and it makes the characters really interesting. And I do like that they incorporate a lot of DC Pantheon into the story as cool background. So, yeah.
A lot of good art in these books.
Yeah, the art is actually pretty phenomenal in this.
A whole bunch of really good art.
It's kind of weird and distorting at times. Like, Batman doesn't look like square-jawed, muscle-bound Batman at times. Like, when he's stressed out in this book, it looks like he's stressed out. If you're still interested, despite all the stuff we spoiled,
you should Reflection, check it out. I mean,
still check it out, yeah.
It's a good book to have on the shelf. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. And, it does incorporate some of this just like comic book craziness. Yeah, Batman and the Red Hood watch Bloodhaven explode, and then you get to hear a story about how one time Superboy punched time in the face.
On that note, you've been listening to The Chat Cave here on McGTV, youtube.com/MikeMcGTV. You can also check out Max over at youtube.com/3Geeks Network. We're going to be having a podcast with him pretty shortly here. And subscribe, like, dislike even, comment below. Tell us how we're wrong and that Jason Todd is totes OMG awesome. And that Tim Drake's the whiny jerk of a Robin. We might have to do something with that at a certain point.
Yeah,
Talk.
I think we should have like a discussion about who's the best Robin.
There's I saw news that someone had edited together all of the Bond movies to show all 6 Bonds in one 2-hour-long movie doing a fight to the death. I'm like, you know what? Let's see if we could make that work, but for Robins.
Yes. See you guys, same chat time, same chat channel.
Thank you so much, old chum.